A Syrian ready to perish was my father. Shalom. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahawashi, Bahashem Rachakodash. Double honors to our apostles and our elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessing and many salutations unto your elect across the four winds of this earth, fulfilling your lots in all truth and all sincerity. I'm the brother Sha'ar from the Great Millstone Datas branch, coming to you all with another lesson through the Spirit. The Lord's willing, this lesson here will be edifying unto the flock. Now, what was just read here was a snippet of a passage in Deuteronomy, the 26th chapter, verse 5. All right. And when you read this, even when you read the chapter, starting from the top, it's going into how we are supposed to present ourselves to the Lord, all right, by way of going to the priest and presenting our first fruits unto the Lord. All right. And there was an utterance or a prayer that we had to pray unto the Lord. And this was something that had to be done. All right. So just to give a brief abridgment in Deuteronomy 26. Now, when you jump to verse 5, it says, "And thou shalt speak and say before Yahweh thy God, a Syrian ready to perish was my father." All right. So that was what we had to utter before the Lord. A Syrian ready to perish was my father. And when you go into this Syrian that was ready to perish, all right, this is actually talking about Jacob. All right. Now, Jacob wasn't an actual Syrian. OK, but more so it's worded as Syrian because that is namely the region where our father Abraham came from, where his nativity was. And there was also covenants that was made of the inhabitants within that area that we married with. OK, this is where you can find the account in Genesis 24. And Lord's willing, I can get it here shortly. But going into the account where Abraham sent his servant to find Rebecca out there in the land of Padanaram, which is southeast Turkey. It's kind of connected to Syria, but northern Iraq as well. It's like right within that region, you know, south of the mountains of Ararat a little bit. But that's where the brother of Abraham, Nahor, that's where he settled. All right. And there was a covenant that was made within Nahor's line. All right. And there was accounts going into it, like I mentioned in Genesis 24, where Abraham's servant went up there to find Rebecca. And later on, Jacob went up there to the land of Haran, all right, which is that region, to find Leah and Rachel as well. Now, I know I said quite a bit, but I'm going to bring out some precepts, Lord willing, this is edifying, touching up on why he's considered a Syrian, and even just going into a little history about that. All right. Now, going into the lineage or the nativity, I'd rather say, of Abraham, we can start at the book of Genesis, the 12th chapter. All right. And I'm going to start from the top and I'm going to read down. And it says, "Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make thee a great nation and will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curseth thee, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran." All right, so that's that name of that land right there, the land of Haran. Now keep that in mind, okay? And in verse 5 it says, "And Abram took Sarah his wife, or Sarai, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance, and they had gathered the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came." Now I'm going to touch up on this region of Haran and the significance within this region. All right, because you read about how Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldees, which is somewhat a little bit south of Haran, but that whole region, all right, is like Babylon, right where Iraq, which is Babylon, connects to southeast Turkey. Okay. Now, when you go into this significance, what is it? And El Yasuamba always goes into this, you know, how Abraham was just like us. He came out of Babylon just like us. All right. But it mentioned Lot, Abraham's brother's son. OK, and it mentions Haran. Now, when you go into that region, Haran was actually one of Abraham's brothers, and that's also the father of Lot. Abraham had two brothers. He had a brother named Nahor, and he had a brother named Haran. All right. And when it goes into Abraham separating from his father's house, these are the people that he separated from. But there was still covenants that was made between the two because they were brothers. All right. And when you go into Nahor, Nahor had children. He had children from Milcah, which Milcah was also the daughter of Haran, who was Lot's sister. And out of Milcah, all right, Nahor, which was Abraham's brother, all right, had children. And one of the children of Nahor that I want to touch into in this lesson as well is going to be Bethuel. All right, because within the line of Nahor and Bethuel, there was a pact that was made between Abraham and that line of Bethuel. Okay, so I wanted to touch up on that in Genesis, the 12th chapter, going into how Abraham was called out from the land of Haran to go into the land of Canaan. All right. And this is where the rest of Abraham's story is going to proceed. All right. But I do want to pull up a precept here in the book of Deuteronomy, the 22nd chapter. That way I could go into a little more detail of how that union came into play between those two lines. All right. And why that scripture in Deuteronomy 26 is likening our father Jacob to being the Syrian. All right. Now, when you read this here in the book of Genesis, the 22nd chapter, all right, and I want to start at a good point. This is it right here. This is the book of Genesis, chapter 22, verse 23, because remember, I just mentioned Bethuel, who was the son of Nahor, which was Abraham's brother. All right, so it reads, and Bethuel begat Rebekah, and Rebekah was the wife of Isaac later on. All right. And it says, these 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother, and his concubine, whose name was Rumah, she bare also Tebah and Gaham and Thahash and Makkah. All right. But I wanted to go into that in Genesis 22, how it mentioned Bethuel. And Rebekah came out of Bethuel, which came out of Nahor, who was the brother of Abraham. All right. And I mentioned the marriage that took place as well, all right, between Rebekah and Isaac and how that was organized. So I'm going to jump a little further to Genesis 24, and I'm going to start at verse 3. And it says, and I'm going to start at really the top. That way we can get the understanding of what really transpired. But it says, and Abraham was old and well stricken in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house, that ruled over all that he had, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear by Yahweh, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell, but thou shalt go into my country and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac. All right, hold on one sec. Forgive me, y'all. Bear with me one sec. All right. So to go back into that, what was just taking place was Abraham having a conversation with his servant, his top servant. And what was to be done was his servant was to go into the land of Abraham's homeland, all right, which is called the land of Nahor or the land of Haran, all right, which was read about earlier in Genesis, the 12th chapter, where Abraham separated from. And he was commanded that his servant, he commanded his servant to go out there in that land and find himself a wife. And it was uttered that he wasn't supposed to take a wife out of the Canaanites, but rather within his kinsmen. Okay. Now, when you go into that region again, that connects with Syria. It connects with southeast Turkey and also northern Babylon. That's where all those regions meet. All right. Now, when you go into this land right here, and I'll pull the precept as well. All right. Matter of fact, before I go there, I'm going to jump to verse 10 in Genesis 24. And it says, and the servant took 10 camels, and of the camels his master. So this is going into when the servant actually got to that land. All right. You read earlier in the chapter where Abraham told him to go there. Where I'm reading now was where he actually settled. So it says, and the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master and departed. And for all the goods of his master were in his hand. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, unto the city of Nahor. So it's mentioned the city of Nahor, who was Abraham's brother, all right, who had children. And out of these children, this is where Rebekah was going to come from, who was considered a Syrian. I'm going to go into that as well. All right. And how this covenant and this league was made between this household by marriage. And we always talk about this. All right. Going into history, whenever we married our sons off to different daughters, that was to establish a legacy and also join two households together to be one. All right. So this is when Abraham's servant was sent to find Isaac's wife. And he went and settled in the land of Nahor. And when you read this for yourself, you can go into the account that took place. It's really a beautiful account that took place. And Lord willing, the Spirit moves me to do a lesson on this one of these days. But when you read about that account, man, it was very spiritual and heavy. And it can kind of be correlated to Yahushua in the church. But that's for another lesson or another day, you know. But this was the land that Rebekah was found. All right. In the name of this land, it mentions the land of Nahor, but you can also find it listed as what's called Padanaram as well. All right. Padanaram. Now, when you go into this, you can find this here in Genesis 25 and 20. And it reads, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padanaram, the sister to Laban, the Syrian. So you see here, it mentions Padanaram, which is also the land of Haran, all right, the land of Nahor, and also that region that was given unto Nahor and his seed, all right, as a possession. And this is the region where our forefather Abraham came from, where he separated, all right. But it mentions the land of Padanaram, where he took the daughter of Bethuel, all right, the Syrian. All right. So hopefully more understanding is coming out on that Deuteronomy 26, where it says our father is Syrian. All right. Because our father Abraham actually dwelt within that region. All right. Predominantly that area of Haran, Padanaram. Now, Ur was a little south of that again. All right. But that's where Abraham was from. All right. You can even actually go into the history of Abraham's travel. All right. To Ur. All right. To Padanaram. And then going back south, where he entered into the land of Canaan. Okay, and they call that land the Fertile Crescent. Okay, but going back to it, because I wanted to touch up on something as well, because it does say a Syrian, all right, but something to understand as well. And I remember the Apostle Aramla mentioned this in a lesson that he did a little while back. Going into this isn't actually even talking about the nation of Syria that came out of Shem. We got to remember there's certain people that had the same names. All right. Now, when you go into the nation of Syria or Aram, they were given within that region. But the league that was made, all right, between the children of, the daughters of Laban and the daughter of Bethuel were not of the actual line of the Syrians. OK, and just to go into that really quick, I'm going to read this here in the book of hold on one sec. Let me get it. I don't know if I wrote this one down, but it's no biggie. You can find this here in Genesis chapter 10. All right. And this is going into the descendants of our forefather Shem. And it says, unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. The children of Shem, Elam and Assur, and Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram. All right. So these are all the sons of Shem. Now it mentions Arphaxad and it mentions Aram. Now, one thing to understand, because I went into the history of Abraham and the league that he made with Nahor and how his children married into the children or the daughters of Nahor. All right. Now, that's within Arphaxad, because Abraham came out of Arphaxad. Nahor came out of Arphaxad. Rebekah came out of Arphaxad. But why are they called Syrians? All right. Because Aram, when you go into Aram is another name for Syria. Aram was one of the sons of Shem. So why is it mentioning these people to being Syrians as well? That's because there was also an Aram that came out of Nahor. All right. When you go into Nahor, all right, he had a son named Kemuel. All right. And that's where Aram came from. All right. So within that region, namely, I mean, that is within that Syrian region, but that's not actually going into Rebecca and Rachel and Laban and everything who are called Syrians. They didn't actually come out of the Aram or Syria, which came directly from Shem. But this is another Syria or Aram. All right. You can find also in the scriptures in different versions, it'll mention Arameans. All right. And this is going into the family line that came out of Nahor. All right. Which is also pacts and marriages that was made between the children of Abraham and the children of Nahor. All right. So hopefully that made sense. Matter of fact, I mentioned Aram, so I might as well read this really quick. And this is Genesis chapter 22. And I'm going to actually start at 20. And I read it, but I'm going to read it again. It says, and it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, behold, Milcah, she has also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. All right. And this is going into the children of Nahor, who's his firstborn, and Booz his brother, and Kemuel, the father of Aram. And when you read that in the NLT, it says the ancestors of the Arameans. All right. So this is a completely different Aram or Syria. All right. Versus the Syria or Aram that was birthed out of Shem. Hopefully this is coming together. Excuse me. Hopefully this is coming together. All right. So when it mentions our father, a Syrian ready to perish, not only was it within that region where Abraham was from, but also too, you had actual Aram that was within that house. OK. And also that leads me, and I know I said I'd finish it off here, but I can also finish this off. And this is a very popular precept that gets brought out. All right. Pertaining to Esau. But when you read this in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 7, used to get a lot of slack from a lot of people, especially out of the churches that would try to come in and combat what we're saying. And they would bring this precept out, which they don't have any understanding. This is Deuteronomy 23 and 7. It says, thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother. And thou shalt not abhor an Egyptian, because thou wast a stranger in his land. All right. Now, when you go into this here, that word Edomite is not supposed to be there. All right. It's already been affirmed, and it's been shown plenty of times that is a clerical error. Because when you go into that in the Hebrew, how it was written, and when you look at the da and the ra, those two letters, the da and the ra in the Hebrew alphabet, they look very similar, especially in the Assyrian text. All right. So instead of saying Adam or Adawam, all right, it really says Aram or Aram, which is Syrian. All right. So instead, it should say, thou shalt not abhor a Syrian, for he is thy brother. And the reason why it mentions the Syrian being our brother, again, going back to the pacts and the leagues that was made, all right, through marriage from Abraham and Nahor. OK, going into that, how they chose daughters of the land of Abraham and Nahor's nativity. All right, which was in Babylon, pretty much right where Babylon met southeast Turkey and Syria, right within that region. OK, so hopefully this came together and made sense. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahawashi, Bahashem, Rachakodash. Double honors to our apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessing and many salutations unto you elect across the four winds of this earth, fulfilling your lots in truth and sincerity.